There has been some updates on the defunding of Planned Parenthood and the fight against that that's been happening. It feels like forever, but really for the last few weeks, as it seems to be flip-flopping after the big, beautiful bill was passed.
Absolutely. So in Massachusetts, that's what we've been talking about. In Massachusetts, the there's a judge there that actually stopped the government from stopping funding. So the funding is now flowing. So she allowed the funding to flow to Planned Parenthood. But that case in Massachusetts only applies to Planned Parenthood, and then she broadened it to every affiliate of Planned Parenthood. However, the Family Planning Association of Maine, they are not affiliated with Planned Parenthood. So they still have their funding stopped. So they filed an exact similar suit in Maine as the one in Massachusetts. And we have filed our amicus brief in that case, stating, obviously, that there is no right to government subsidies for abortion. That Congress has the power of the purse, and the courts can't order Congress to spend money that it has declined to spend. This is absolutely a constitutionally, we've had it before, the courts, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ruled that states absolutely can make a decision to favor childbirth over abortion, and they can do that with the power of the purse. So once again, this is just plot by the pro-abortion side to keep taxpayer dollars going into their coffers. The taxpayers are funding abortion, and we are standing against it.
And Cece, it's interesting, one, that yes, we did file in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maine that brief supporting the government, pointing out these separation of powers issues with the court getting involved here, now trying to force the government to spend what Congress has decided not to spend with a law that was passed and signed by the president. But we also look at what's happening in Massachusetts, because we talked about that judge that set the deadline and then put out a preliminary injunction that affected 25% of Planned Parenthood effectively still could get funding, but the rest of the 75% couldn't. And then she said, I'll take it under advisement. Planned Parenthood was even confused, filed a motion for clarification. The government didn't waste time. And they went ahead and filed their notice of appeal with the Court of Appeals. It's at the First Circuit, I believe, saying we're going to appeal this. Then, after that, the judge puts out another preliminary injunction, didn't tie the two together, didn't say the previous one is now void because this is a superseding preliminary injunction, and I say now it applies to everyone. Two different preliminary injunctions with a different rationale, so that it appears the government has to expend more resources to fight both of these.
Yeah.
The government yesterday filed notice of appeal for the second preliminary injunction. Our team already has a brief ready on the first notice of appeal. The second one was just filed yesterday, but that appeals court has not yet put out a briefing schedule.
Right.
And one, they could have been waiting, which for the first one, that is a little bit long of a time. Normally you would see that. Maybe the appeals court was waiting to see what that under advisement turned into. Now we know. And now there's a second notice of appeal. Maybe they will combine that at their court, which they can do. But know that our team is already working and ready to engage this, not just in Maine, but in Massachusetts as well, as we did at the district court level, now at the appeals court, as we fight this, we know, all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I don't know, we've discussed this too before, but don't know what that judge was thinking, because basically, exactly like you said, hey, this preliminary injunction, I'm going to make a ruling. It only affects 25%, and I'm going to take the rest under advisement. And then later she takes and orders it to cover every single Planned Parenthood, which they weren't all even under her jurisdiction, but she just lumped them all in and said, I'm applying this. So basically, it's a nationwide injunction, which we know the Supreme Court has said you can't do. So I don't know if she's playing these games to somehow try and get around it, if she's playing these games to prolong it, because it's only for a year that this funding has been stopped. So she can definitely let's drag this process out so that, it comes and goes and they still remain getting their funding for a year.
And one other interesting caveat to all of this is that, one, we know Planned Parenthood is trying to run out the clock because at least under this appropriations and under this big, beautiful bill, this reconciliation bill, rather, there's only a year. Now, hopefully that Congress will be able to extend that and keep that going, but it is this year. They are trying to run out the clock so they can get their funding back regardless. The judge obviously has to know that the Supreme Court said nationwide injunctions, universal injunctions are a no-go, as well as they said states can defund Planned Parenthood. It would be weird for the judge not to, even though it's different arguments, not take that into consideration. The Supreme Court just said a state can do it, but the federal government can't do it. That doesn't make any sense when one is governed by the Constitution and then the Supremacy Clause. Typically, the state would be more restricted, not less restricted.
Right. And like I said, the Supreme Court has absolutely said that the Congress can make a value judgment favoring childbirth over abortion, and they can do that by the power of the purse. So these are issues that have already gone to the Supreme Court, have already been ruled upon. They're just trying to be creative. Again, like you said, I think extending it out to keep getting funding for Planned Parenthood and the abortion.
So what's next for us? Our team's just on it?
We watch it. We will absolutely file as soon as there's a briefing schedule. We will file in those appeals. Hopefully they will be joined in Massachusetts. We just filed in Maine. We'll watch that. We will file every chance we get.
Let's go to Dan, who's calling on line 2 from California, watching on the ACLJ app. Dan, you're on Seculo.
You were saying how this judge ruled that Planned Parenthood now gets funded, even though the funding has been removed from the budget. I know something about the congressional budget. There's normally a line item for everything. You can't so I'm wondering where the funding is going to be coming from.
So, Dan, the way that it works for Planned Parenthood, they got government money through 2 primary ways. There was originally, they got it from Title X funding, which is family planning funding, which is a pool of money that gets grants and government funding to different organizations, specifically to provide family planning health care, if you want to call it that, which in the case of Planned Parenthood, it helped supplement their abortion business. And earlier this year, when President Trump came back into office, they made a change in the way that those grants would be given out and said if you are promoting abortion when you are giving this health care, you can no longer receive Title X funding. So that already, they just amended the way that they give that money out originally. And that's not what happened in the Big Beautiful Bill. I'll get to that in just a second. But so earlier, they took that funding away because Planned Parenthood would refuse to stop telling people, you can have an abortion, you should have an abortion. And so that is one of the ways that they were stopped receiving funds. Now, those funds, the Title X funds, still remain, but for organizations that don't advertise for abortion. And then second is Medicaid reimbursement. So because Planned Parenthood operates medical clinics and facilities with very specific purposes, they would be able to bill Medicaid for reimbursement of services. And we know one of the main ways that Planned Parenthood is able to skew their numbers and say that abortion isn't that much of their business is they count every point of contact as a service. So when you check in, when you get your blood pressure taken, and then a lot of those services would then be charged to the government through Medicaid reimbursement. They would submit all the paperwork and do all that, and then the government repays Planned Parenthood for services rendered to patients that come in that are on Medicaid. So that is kind of their parlor game of how they got funding. They wouldn't get reimbursed for abortion services, but everything up until they would be getting reimbursement from. So what the Big Beautiful Bill did was it made it so that Medicaid reimbursements could not go to clinics and organizations that provide abortion, as well as they had to meet a reimbursement threshold, which I think was $800,000 a year in Medicaid reimbursements. And now Planned Parenthood was the largest of those type clinics, but it wasn't the only one. And that's why we've also filed in Maine, where a different organization that was an abortion clinic that would do the exact same thing that Planned Parenthood would. They were above the $800,000 in reimbursement threshold, but also provide abortion. So they were no longer eligible for that money from the government, this Medicaid reimbursement. And so they sued as well. And we filed a brief there just on Friday. So we're fighting back, but I hope that clears it up. There were two ways they received money. Both, as of right now, had been taken away and legally have been taken away, except there is this preliminary injunction on the big, beautiful bill portion. So they are still able to get those Medicaid reimbursements for all the services they provide, except for abortion procedures.